One of the cool things about being back for We Are Weekend is interacting with folks from different classes, from different walks of life, from different generations. And it's just awesome to hear their stories as far as their experiences when they were here on campus. I had a chance to actually go and tour Beaver Stadium. I had a chance to go to WPSU and see how they go about their daily activities to get folks involved in their operations.
Penn State is really a pivotal place for both my wife and I. We met here. I feel like I grew up at Penn State. It just broadened my horizons, both academically and also as a person. And being involved with different activities on campus really molded me into the person that I am today. We have 5 kids. So for us, trying to get away and do something just the 2 of us is really tough. So it's really great that we can have our kids with us and participate. They've had a great time participating in the different tours and activities, enjoying some of the food, and having them here as part of our family has really been able to allow us to enjoy the weekend, not just my wife and I, but our entire family together.
Being a pioneer is really special because it was like getting an award, and the award was just for being 50 years a graduate. But actually tonight I get to put the medals on some of the new pioneers, and it's passing the torch. And that's very special. And We Are Weekend allows me to do that for them, and hopefully they'll get enough out of We Are Weekend that they'll come back and do the same thing in the future years.
We thought it'd be really cool to bring alumni tour guides back to give tours with current students and really get that alumni and also current student perspective to be able to share all of our stories. And for us on the tours, it's been really fun because we're also hearing stories from other Penn State alumni. Even if they weren't tour guides, they have their own sort of understanding of campus and little stories from different areas. So for me, it's been just so great, that synergy of sort of stories and everyone sort of having their love for Penn State and being able to share that. For me, coming back to Penn State is so much about reliving old traditions, but also creating new ones. And I really thought coming back for We Are Weekend would be a great opportunity to start a new tradition at Penn State.
We are!
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for We Are Week today. My name is Lindsay Zapletal, and I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Relations in the College of Health and Human Development. I'm pleased to welcome all of our alumni and friends to our HHD on Location Home Edition series in collaboration with the Penn State Alumni Association's We Are Week, bringing HHD to you in your home. In this afternoon's program, Uncork and Unwind, we will hear from Donna Quadri-Felitti, Marvin Ashner Director and Associate Professor in the School of Hospitality Management, and Pat Felitti, Hospitality Management Instructor, sommelier, and former New York City fine dining restaurateur. And more importantly, they're married. They will teach us the basics of wine tasting by using the 5 S's: see, swirl, smell, sip, and savor. If you're inclined, please grab your favorite glass of wine and follow along using the tasting sheet that will be provided in a link to you in the chat. Donna and Pat will present for 40 to 45 minutes, leaving time for questions at the end. If you have a question, please post it in the chat in your event hub, and it will be addressed at the end of the program. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the program over to Pat and Donna. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Lindsay, and thanks to all of you who are joining us from far and wide, especially our guests who joined us to provide a few smiles and winks and nods and maybe a lift of a glass as well. Thank you all for being here. Pat and I are honored that you're spending time with us. So the material and the practice that we're presenting today is drawn from a course that's been taught in the School of Hospitality Management for well over 20 years. Today it's called Introduction to Wines of the World. The school itself is celebrating 84 years, and we are among the oldest of its kind in the country. In fact, this year, 2021, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the school awarding its first PhD. So as you might imagine, Wines of the World is a very popular course, but so is our Gen Ed Health course of alcohol awareness, and coming to hospitality management in the fall, a new Gen Ed course entitled Alcohol, Cuisine, and Culture. As educators, we recognize it's a privilege to host students 21 and above in the sensory appreciation of wine. And we also have a duty to make sure we teach them to treat alcohol responsibly. So a portion of my research portfolio is dedicated to wine tourism and its contributions to rural communities, because across human history and development, wine has played a role in society, culture, and economies. And winemakers throughout centuries have worked really hard to put the best of their art in your glass. Why? To enhance the human experience. So after one of our school's long-serving faculty retired, Pat began teaching the Wines of the World course. And as Lindsay said, he is from New York City and spent 3 decades in fine dining, but he was also born into the restaurant family in New York. And he has managed some of the most famous and classic steakhouses in Manhattan that you know. So Pat's able to bring both HM majors and non-majors the essentials of what they need to build a life's appreciation of wine. And although we're both designated sommeliers, I readily admit he has a far superior palate than I do. With that, I'll turn it over to my other half, Pat.
So welcome everyone. Thanks for spending a little time. This is something that we do kind of often, and it's great. I would assume there are some of you that, of course, are seasoned wine drinkers. Many of you, I'm sure, just enjoy wine and want to find out a little bit more about how to taste wine, the framework for tasting wine, and so on. So I always like to start with a lot of questions that we get pretty often and kind of get those out of the way. And then, it's sort of a list of wine myths, and some of these you probably already know. And excuse me, every now and again, I'm going to glance down at my notes because otherwise we'll be talking about cars and football and music and other stuff. Yeah. So a couple of myths to just get out of the way. A lot of the time, people that either take our course or everyday drinkers who just like to have a little glass of wine, maybe their favorite Pinot Grigio or Cabernet every now and again, are generally afraid to ask questions about wine. So it's always nice to just get the fake stuff out of the way for everyone, so we all kind of start on the same page. So the first thing is, many people think that sweet wines are like entry-level wines. And in point of fact, that's really not the case. If you enjoy sweet wines, you just enjoy sweet wine. Some people like them bone dry, where they're about to evaporate on your tongue, and that's okay. Some people like them more astringent and so on. But, there are sweet wines that are very famous. One of the wines in the Bordeaux 1855 classification was a dessert wine, was a sweet dessert wine, Chateau Haut-Briand. So sweet wines do not equate to entry-level wines. Wines always are better with age. No, they're not. Neither am I. Not all wines age the same way. So there are some wines where, and this is part of the winemaker's art, some wines are built to age or made to age with the in mind. The end result will be a flavor profile that the winemaker wants you to have 20 years from now or 15 years from now. But most wines that we see in the wine store, when we're out purchasing a bottle of wine from anywhere from $12 to $30, $35, those wines have what we consider, they have a consumption date almost. And basically they're made to be consumed within 3 to 5 years after the wines are released. So not necessarily the vintage date. So the vintage could be 2021, but perhaps that wine ages a little bit at the winery. It's not released until 2023. So then by 2025, 26, you kind of want to make sure you drink those wines. When a wine is built to last for many years, you'll know, because that's the reason you're paying $200 a bottle and further. So if you someone gives you a wine for a special birthday or a special occasion, drink it. You don't put it in the closet and drink it for your 60th anniversary. It's not going to be any good. Screw caps equal lower quality wine. Well, in point of fact, they really, really don't. So just a quick aside on what a screw cap is. A screw cap is only the closure of the wine. It's the part that screws onto the top of the bottle. The technology, the engineering is inside that little plastic piece that's on the inside of the screw cap. So that's the piece that is engineered to allow a specific amount of oxygen to pass through, the same way that a cork would. So really, other than consumers' evaluation of value, it almost doesn't make a difference. And real cork comes from the bark of a tree in Portugal, and it's a finite resource. So while they are managed sustainably, there isn't enough naturally to go around, and there are many other things in between, man-made cork. All boxed wine is mediocre. No, it's not. It's not true. Some boxed wine is terrible and mediocre. That's true. I can give you a lot of bottled wines that are really terrible and mediocre as well, right? So anyone that has traveled abroad, if you're in Europe, they have fine wines in the box all the time in grocery stores. There are very, very good wineries that we pay a premium for here in the United States because they're exported to us, but they're their local wineries, say in France or in Spain or in Italy, and those wines are perfectly fine. And there are many fine wines in Boston. I think we're going to see actually more and more. Red wine should never be chilled. Not true. You drink wine the way you enjoy it. So you can chill white wine, red wine. You can put ice in white wine. If that's how you enjoy it, then that's a better experience for you, and that's the way it should be. Another one is that blended wines are inferior. That's absolutely not the case. So some of the most famous wines in the world are actually blends. So, you know, if you've ever heard of Chateau Margaux or Chateau Latour or any of these famous French classified wineries, those are a mix. Those are a blend of grapes. So blending has nothing to do with quality. So it's just a couple of those things that I like to get out of the way. And the biggest one, which is what stops most people from speaking about wine or asking really what's on their mind or saying what they feel is true, is that they feel that wine experts have superior palates. Well, I can never taste wine like that because your palate is much better than mine. And the reality is that's just not the case. We all come with the same equipment, right? So we all have the same tongue, the same taste buds, the same taste buds. The difference is, and it's the example of a strawberry. You don't have a particular taste bud on your tongue that knows what a strawberry is, right? So what you have are 5 or 6 items that communicate to your brain, right? So we all know salt and sweet and bitter and umami and all these terms, right? So we can taste those things. It's the training through many, many years that a specific combination of those items come into your brain is recognized as a strawberry. And after a while, you know the difference between a really good ripe strawberry and one that you buy in December in the market that looks like a strawberry, but is bland. It doesn't have any flavor, right? Well, with wine, it's exactly the same way. The only difference in someone who speaks about wine is that they have developed on purpose a way to train their brain to understand all of these nuances that you and I taste all the time. It's just that some of us are afraid to say, this tastes like gasoline. It tastes like gym socks. And the reality is, whatever, if it tastes like acetone to you, that's what it tastes like to you. No one gets insulted by it. And that generally is the reason a lot of people don't speak up when it comes to wine. So this framework of tasting wine, this see, swirl, smell, sip, and savor, is just a quick shortcut for you to enjoy wine a little bit better. Meaning it's going to make you a little bit more thoughtful of the practice. And that's all you have to be. You won't be a sommelier in the next 45 minutes, but you will see wine in a different way. And that's really the whole idea. So hopefully most of you have a glass of wine. It's always good to have a glass of wine. And one other quick aside is, if you have, the really cute glasses with no stems, regift those.
Or use them for water glasses.
Use them as water.
Lovely.
Yeah, they're wonderful for water. So wine goes in a stem glass, right? Because we're all above 21 and we're adults now, and we can all drink wine. But the other reason is, and you see this if you've ever watched a video of someone blind tasting wine, or if you've ever seen a sommelier competition, you'll see them look at wine and you'll see them swirl the wine. You've seen people do this in restaurants, I'm sure. If you order an expensive bottle of wine in a restaurant that has a sommelier, the sommelier will taste the wine for you first. And the first thing he'll do is he'll look at it and he'll give it a quick swirl. So I don't know if you can see that, which is a lot easier with the stem on the glass than it is if you're holding.
And the other thing is, there's the S of see, and it's really hard to see, as Pat would say, with my greasy paw prints all over it. So you want to keep the glass, clean, quite frankly. That's really one of the reasons, not necessarily legs. And also, we're going to teach you about using a piece of white paper or a white napkin to hold your glass up when you do see. That's one of the 5 steps in the practice. And you best see through clean glass, not a blue glass, not a yellow glass, and not with your big paws on them. Big paws.
And Fred Flintstone's loincloth will definitely get in the way of judging the color of the wine. So that said, a great way to start. So a lot of, please understand that this see and swirl, smell, sip, and savor. Okay. So these 5 S's are about expectation, because that's what wine is about. Wine is about access and expectation. Access meaning the more variety, the more diverse wines you get to drink, the better you will be at defining and understanding some key components in all of these wines. And here's the best part, it's how you identify what you like. So we've all had the experience of walking into a wine store and looking at, and maybe we want Merlot, and you look at a whole sea of Merlot. So our next thing then is really to look at the price point, right? So, okay, I want a more Merlot, but I don't know the difference between these 3 shelves, 80 feet long, of all these Merlots, but I know I want to spend $18 to $22 or $45, whatever it is. And then that's what we go to. Well, in between, there's a whole other step that you're missing. And that is understanding, having a little bit of an expectation of what you like. And the way that begins is you identify something you like. Maybe you're at a friend's house and you had, sitting on the back deck, you had a great rosé on a warm day, and it was from France, and you kind of make note of the label, a mental note of the label. Or you're at someone's dinner party and they had a really nice Cabernet or a really nice Pinot Noir, and you sort of just remember the name. And then take a look and do a quick Google search, and I'll give you a site that's really, really good to do this, on that particular producer, and take a look at it. And you don't need to understand the chemistry or the history of it. What you want to do is understand the geographic location. Where is this? Maybe that has a clue, that has something to do with why I like this particular Cabernet, right? So Cabernet, for instance, or Pinot Noir are two of what we call the big six wines. These are wines that are propagated all throughout the globe. And you can have a Cabernet that comes from Argentina, from Chile, from the West Bank of Bordeaux, from California, and so on. And they are all precisely the same genus of grape, yet they're all different. So some of it is the winemaker's input, but a lot of it also has to do with something called terroir, which is the earth, the land, the climate, and all of those things that come together. So with a little bit of knowledge, now you have a point of reference. Once you do that, now you kind of want to go through this process to understand that you're getting the right experience for what you purchased.
And I'd like to say that, one of the things that we really stress in class, and we hope that you are all doing today, while we're not all together, symbolically, we ask some friends to join us on screen, because tasting wine and learning wine is really a shared experience. And so doing it together and exchanging your thoughts and opinions about what you see, smell, and taste is really the beginning of building a vocabulary and understanding your own flavor profile, as well as what you like and what your friends like.
So the first S is to see. So the first thing that we generally do is take a look through the wine, preferably if it's handy, and you can do this in a restaurant with a white napkin or a white tablecloth, is if you can view the wine against a white background. And it takes literally a second. So, you can kind of do it inconspicuously if you're at a dinner table at a restaurant. You kind of don't want to be that guy. But you can do it against a white tablecloth, and you just want to take a quick note. But what you need to practice, one of the things you're looking for is not white or red, of course, but there are many, many gradations in between, right? So there is sort of a lighter red that could be more of a garnet color that you can see through a little bit better. There's the deep, dark, velvety, jet black, those kinds of rich wines. And there is every hue, every gradation in between. And sometimes you'll even notice maybe a little brown tinge. But all of those are clues to what's in the glass.
And that's why you don't want to use the juice glass with Fred Flintstone's picture on it, because it's really hard to see what color the wine is.
And also you want to be able to see through the on lighter red wines, of course, and the real dark ones are a little bit difficult, but you want to see how clear the wine is. So meaning, there are some wines out there. Most wines will be sparkling or almost brilliantly clear to see through. Of course, it's easier to notice with white wine than it is with red wines, but you'll see it in red wines too. They'll have a little bit of almost a sparkle to them when you look through them. There are other wines that are a little bit cloudy, and perhaps they're meant to be cloudy. Sometimes those wines are unfiltered wines. So the expectation of what you purchased because of something that you tasted that you liked, so now you start to key into, did I get what I wanted? Is this what I purchased? Is this what I was after? And so on. So it's a lot of practice in, one thing is taking a look through it. The mechanism is to do it against the white background if you can, but make a note of what you're looking at. So if I'm looking at a Pinot Noir and it's sort of a garnet color and I can see through it and it's brilliantly clear, you sort of make a mental note of that. And in time, without realizing, you'll get better and better and better at this, and it'll mean different things to you.
And if you're struggling to describe a color and you have children with the jumbo Crayola box, that's always a good reference point. Or if you go to the big Joanne Fabrics and someone like look for red thread or yellow thread, they've got names, but the Crayola box is my favorite. So if you're struggling to find what it looks like, you can always have resources at home.
So the next thing you want to do is give the wine a little swirl. And here's why we do this. It looks very elegant, doesn't it? It looks really, really cool.
No,
but that's not.
No, it doesn't.
So the reason is you want to get some air, you want some oxygen to get into the glass, into the wine, to help the wine, what we call opening up. So what open up means in layman's terms is basically it's oxygen is able to attach itself to the compounds that are in the wine that will release aromas right away. And the wine will change depending on how much oxygen is in there. So if we, for example, if you just opened a bottle of wine and poured it, if the wine is of what we say a current release, something that's expected to be drunk pretty soon today, upon the time that you purchase it, there shouldn't be much of a change. You'll pour it, taste it, swirl it around a little bit, taste it again, probably won't change at all. But if you were to do this as an extreme example with a very old bottle of wine, so if you had, perhaps you had a wine that has been bottled up, literally bottled up for 25 years, for instance, and we're not speaking about the quality of the wine, whatever wine it is, once you aerate it, once you get it into the glass and swirl it around and let some oxygen attach itself to it, when you first get it out of the bottle, if it's a red wine, if it's a French Bordeaux, a lot of the times it'll just smell like you're in a barnyard. Yet if you swirl it around, let some oxygen attach to it, you will see within minutes how it changes. So,
and Pat, when people decant, right? When would that be the right time?
So you decant to do exactly this process. And decanting simply means pouring the wine from one vessel into another vessel. And if you can imagine, what that does is as the wine is being poured off, you're mixing it with you're really aerating the wine. It's agitating and it's aerating. That's one reason. That's one of the biggest reasons. Another very obvious reasons are wines that are very old will have sometimes some sediment that you'll see down in the bottom of the bottle if the bottle was upright. And when the wine is decanted, basically we are racking the wine essentially. So you're pouring off the wine slowly. So, and as you look through the bottle, you will see the sediment start to creep up. And as it hits the neck of the bottle is when you would stop. So that's the second reason. But first and foremost, is to get oxygen into the wine. And that's really all you need to do is pour it from one vessel to another and swirl it in your glass. There's no reason to purchase the little aerator for $13 that spins it. Don't do that.
Save it for a better bottle of wine.
Yeah, that's something else you regift. You don't need that. You just want it enough to swirl it around and get it. And again, most of the wines that we drink, the current release wines, they're not going to change much, but they will change a little bit. And if you're attuned to it, and after a while you will be, you'll notice a difference in the aromas. So that's a little bit of a swirl is very important. And by the way, these first two steps literally take under a nanosecond. It's just a quick look, especially if you would guess at a table with a white tablecloth, it's a quick look and you kind of tilt the glass a little bit, which allows you to see through it a little bit easier. A quick look, swirl, and then a quick sniff.
And on the back of your tasting sheet, there is a blank form that you can use if you're building or you're having a tasting party, or you want to start understanding your own profile, your own wine preferences. You can jot it down, make a note, and keep a record. I have a tasting book that's just for Pinot Noir.
It's very expensive tasting.
No.
So after we've aerated, now what we want to do is we want to take a quick sniff of the wine. So you want to see what aromas are in there. What's everyone talking about? There's a couple of things to remember. One important thing to remember is do not dunk the whole muzzle into the glass and just suck it all in. And the reason is, hey, it doesn't look too good. But the real reason is you will develop something that is referred to as adaptation, meaning your olfactory nerve will get so much of this in one shot that you will adapt to it, and your brain will be looking for other things rather than what you're actually trying to smell. It's the old story about when you're young and you first start using cologne, and it's, you don't think it's, after a couple of weeks, you're just pouring it all on because you don't smell it anymore because you've adapted to it. Well, it's as ridiculous as it sounds, that's exactly what happens. So the way to do it are just short, quick sniffs. And by the way, and you will see some sommeliers do this, you will see wine tasters do this all the time, and you'll see them do it dead on in the center of the glass, give it a swirl, and then sometimes they'll move the glass. Because believe it or not, you will get different aromas from different areas.
And there are different glassware for different types of varietals and so on. So it's one of the reasons why, if you're having a wine tasting party or the wine is very important to your meal, that you don't want to have a heavily fragranced centerpiece, because it can, interrupt. But there's some prompts on your tasting sheet for some ideas about what did you smell? What'd you smell?
Now, here is the part that you sort of practice and train yourself on. This is kind of what we're waiting for. So once you get those aromas, up until now, most of us will take a sniff. Of course, we understand that it's wine, and it's the good or bad judgment right away. It's the sniff, and it's like, hey, that's okay. Well, I don't really like that. And that's kind of where it stops. Now, if you really want to start to enjoy wine a little bit more, and it's not work at all, but take a little mental note. And this sometimes is easier if you're alone. It's not easier if you're at a client dinner with 10 people at the table, of course. But you're sitting home watching TV, or you with one other person, you're with a couple of friends. You can smell it and say, well, it smells like a berry. But don't stop there. And this is a little bit of work on your part, in that it's, well, what kind of a berry? Is it a blueberry? Is it a raspberry? Is it a blackberry? Is it a strawberry? Is it a really ripe raspberry? Because you'll get those too. Is it a very, very ripe strawberry? You'll get a lot of that as well. Is there something off-putting? Is there something in the aroma that doesn't sit well with you? Is there sort of a petrol aroma? Is there an acetone? You'll get those things.
My favorite is green pepper. You don't think of wine, you think of fruit, right? Grapes. And you don't think like a green pepper that you stuff, or put on nachos or something like that. And when someone says that to me, and then I go, yes, that's what I was missing.
This is the part where it's always better to taste with other people. And the more everyone speaks, the better it is for everyone, because that's exactly the way it happens. Two people take the same wine, have a sniff, and someone says bananas and someone says pineapple. And the other person will say, yeah, you're right. I didn't realize that. It's about speaking out. So you kind of have to give up on this notion of not saying a word because you're afraid. The reality is you're helping everyone else, and they will help you the more they speak. It's about vocabulary. Great when you taste wine with people that drink a lot of wine, it's enjoyable because you pick up so much from their vocabulary. It's really, really important.
I think that it's fun for class when you have college students who can shout out what they smell or taste, and everything they say is right because it's just their opinion. And in doing it, we applaud that and we clap for that and we reward that, because someone might say hibiscus and someone says, what's that? It's a flower. It smells like this. And they say, oh, that's what hibiscus smells like. It's fun because there's nothing wrong. It's really building a collective, a community approach to understanding.
And those of you that want to test out something new, do this. Purchase a couple of bottles inexpensively of Sauvignon Blanc. One from Marlborough in New Zealand and one from either California, France, take your pick. Not too expensive, keep them around the same price point, although New Zealand will naturally be less expensive. But you will see in the same grape a world of difference. Not only that, you will taste or take a whiff of that Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, and you will get all of these vegetal characteristics. You'll get a lot of hay right away, grass, totally different than a European Sauvignon Blanc. Yet it's the same grape. It's a varietal wine that you purchase, meaning it's 100% Sauvignon Blanc. And that's a great way to see and work on identifying. So the way we spoke about how your brain interprets those combinations of signals from your palate to make a strawberry. Well, the same thing with with the aromas of wine. You have to train yourself to say, what is the fruit? Or what is the other characteristic? What is minerality? What does that taste like? What does that smell like? So if I smell wet sand or wet stones, is that what the minerality that we're speaking about? And those are very easy things to test on yourself. It's just a little bit of mindfulness when you first begin this practice. So that's the third S is smell, right? So again, and you want to look for different things. You want to definitely look for different fruits. Beyond that, it isn't like you would smell sugar, but you will learn over time that sweet wines have a higher viscosity. They're a little bit thicker. So you will have noticed when you took a look at the wine and gave it a swirl against the glass, the way it hung on the glass, you would have noticed that it's a little bit thicker. That could be a function. Sometimes it'll hang on the glass as a function of alcohol. But if the wine is on the sweet side, you'll see it a little bit more viscous. So that was part of that first S.
That's a really good point, a place for us to mention about legs, another myth. I know a lot of people will say, oh, legs, it's got longer legs, it's better. Not necessarily. It's just a function. It's an expression of what Pat was just speaking about, either sugar or an alcohol. It doesn't necessarily, it'll give you a clue, but we aren't judging that because it's the whole composite. And when we look at something, because the C's, the swirls, and the smells, you're starting to piece together a puzzle about that expectation. And try to practice. If you do this, it really helps to say spice. What's one of the other things on the list? Oh, woodsy. Oh, vegetal. Because if you start to go through the components and then dig a little deeper, you'll go, wow, maybe this was a much better value than I thought because I took the time to be mindful and to really give it a go. Give it a listen.
And there are, I'll use the Sauvignon Blanc example again. You drink an Australian Sauvignon Blanc and you'll taste tomato vines. They're there. So this is part of, these are all these things that we're afraid to speak out about because to us, they sound so off the mark. How could a wine taste like
tomato vine,
a green pepper or a tomato vine or so on? Well, they do. So, that's part of the training as well, is training yourself to be honest and just say what it tastes like. Sometimes it tastes like bubble gum, and there's nothing wrong with that. The other thing that you can get in the aromas is wood is very distinctive, and that's always good to make a mental note of. If something smells woody to you, or it smells buttery, okay, that buttery is that aroma is something called diacetyl, and that comes from generally a secondary fermentation within the wine. But in some, it's prized in some wines, in some Chardonnays. We do what's called a malolactic fermentation or second fermentation in these white wines that turn this sort of green apple type of acidity into this lactic acid or this buttery acidity, which comes across when you smell it, when you nose the wine or get the aroma, comes across as very buttery. Vanilla is an indication of oak a lot of the time. So it's good just to make a mental note and kind of click through the ladder in your brain of what is it. Try to identify what it is when you get the aroma, and force yourself in the beginning. Again, you know, it's a berry. What type of berry? It's gasoline. Is it high test or is it regular? But you can if you force yourself into that process, it'll become second nature quicker than you think. By the way,
we're at the number 4S, my favorite.
So sip. So now this is another one of those places where most people will take a sip and you get the either, hey, this is really good, or you get, oh man, this doesn't work for me, or it's sweet.
And it's funny when we try to explain to students about how they just think they're gonna get to drink it, right? It's only a 1 ounce pour, but you actually, there is a way to do it, and you don't have to be the snob or swirl it and make the funny noises. Not necessary, but there is a way to make sure that you put it in your whole mouth. And explain a little bit about that.
So what you want to do on the first sip, and it's good to break this down, and what we try to do with students all the time is to break this into 2 parts, 2 sips. And the first sip is, because it's a little bit overwhelming. Some wines, as soon as you take a sip, sort of explode on your palate, and there's just so much going on, you don't know kind of where to begin. So what we try to do is begin with taste first before you think about fruits. Once it gets on your palate, and on your palate, I mean you take a small sip, and you make sure that it hits all of the interior of your palate, meaning you want to make sure it gets to the inside of your cheeks, your gums, all of the soft tissues in your palate, of course your tongue, right? But what you're thinking about for that first sip is, and it could go either way, but we do it as acids first. So we think of acidity first. So here's a couple of hints, meaning acidity can be very, very sour, really tart. It could be bitter. You'll learn to identify where bitter is on your palate. It's basically the top center in the back of your palate is what bitter is. You all know it. You'll get it right away. If your cheeks feel a little fuzzy, or your gums, the soft tissues, feel sort of a little fuzzy, sparkly, little tingly, that's tannic acid. That's something that comes from the skin of the grape. It also comes from, it's inherent in wood, in oak especially. So you'll see wines, for a different discussion, but wines that are meant to age over a long period of time. If you drink those wines too early, you'll get a lot of this tannin, because that tannin is there as a preservative and to add structure to the wine, and it helps the wine develop over a great period of time. So if you get that too early, the wine is almost unpalatable. But if you get the acids out of the way first, is it tart? Is it bitter? What does it feel like? What we speak about is a mouthfeel. So before we get to the actual flavors, it's all about what does that feel like first. And there's one thing that crosses over between this tasting for acid and tasting for fruits and vegetables, which is this sense of umami, umami, which is sort of this combination of brothy, meaty, sort of a mouth feel crossover.
Oh.
So if you can sort of make a mental note of how that hits your palate, now you take a second sip, and with that out of the way, because now you know what to expect. Those are the most striking parts when you first take something into your palate, right? It is, you know, if it's really, really tangy or really sour, you almost can't think about everything else. So now we take the second sip, we've done that, that's out of the way. Now you can taste for, what do I taste on the palate? Is there a particular fruit that I taste? Is it is what I taste on my palate what the aromas were? Because many times the aromas are much different than the wine once it hits your palate.
Can we do that?
Yes.
Can we all sip? Let's all do that at least once. You said twice.
So again, it's easy. At this point, you can taste sweet, you can taste sour, you can taste salty, and you will have wines that actually will come across that are salty. Literally, you'll feel the salt, or they're meaty. And if you get into this practice of starting to identify one or two things every time you take a sip of wine, you'll get much better at this, and more things will come to mind. And you're sort of training your mind to understand what these sensations are. Before you know it, and we do this with class, and I'll tell you, we do the same process. And I tell everyone in class on the first day that by the midterm, not by the end, but by the midterm, they will be able to tell the difference between Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc. And oddly enough, every single time, because we didn't do it during COVID, but generally we do a little, as an extra credit, a little tasting for the midterm and the final. And don't you know, better than 80% every single time can identify it by the clues that we speak about. So this gets back to this, you know, you have to put a little effort in and get to it to see why it is you like a particular wine. What is your expectation? Once you have a read on the expectation, your brain will start to key into all of these elements. Go ahead.
Yes, it's true, Ryan. I'm sorry that they didn't have extra credit in wine class when you were in class, but it really challenges the students to have confidence in the practice, in the work, because, you know, here's where we're shouting out, oh, I smell pepper. I smell white pepper. What's the difference between white pepper and black pepper, right? So if you turn to who you're with, or you're making a little note, our hope is that right now, even if you're drinking, you know, Pat's drinking House Chianti, right? He's drinking the juice. I'm drinking my Pinot Noir. And we're hoping that even if you've had this wine before that's in front of you that you know you're enjoying, you're deepening your enjoyment, you're understanding it a little better. And yeah, it is kind of fun to have a final exam where you taste a wine in it. It's not bad.
Yeah, and students themselves are shocked, and you will be shocked as well at how quick your mind will start to register this. So the last S is naturally savor. Okay, we don't use spit for that one because that's separate.
Old school.
We don't like to do that because we paid a lot for this.
Even though we do have small spittoons in our new lab, which I'll tell you all about.
So the savor part is twofold, and that is, now you've thought about the acid, you've thought about fruit, you've done all of this work. Now you just let it rest on your palate, swallow, retro air, breathe out. And you'll notice that if you breathe out through your nose after you've swallowed, oddly enough, you will get a lot of different aspects of the wine that you didn't get either in the aroma when you first sniffed the wine or on your palate. It just happens. But this is the moment where your mind starts to register all of those things that you've been through, whether you know it or not. The other thing is a couple of quick terms. There's something called balance. So we all hear this word a lot. And balance, very, very easy to understand. Balance is, first off, understanding what it was. Again, we go back to that expectation piece. Knowing what the wine was supposed to be that you purchased, that you liked. Meaning, do I like very, very crisp, white, medium alcohol, kind of Granny Smith apple type of acidity? If that's what I like and I purchase that, but when I drink it, there's almost no acidity or it's laying flat. Well, that's where the expectation piece came in. That's what we're tasting for, something specific. But a balance is just denotes the wine did not have one item that had a spike that was incorrect for what the wine should have been. You will taste some wines that are so satisfying, yet you can't put a finger on, or you can't put a taste bud on why it was so satisfying. You can't identify, what is it? Is it a dark berry? What is it? You seem to be, there's no acidity that really strikes you. For some reason, it's satisfying, and that's a wine that's very harmonious. That's a wine that's balanced, and for you, that's the right wine. It's probably well made. You're probably drinking it the other time. And the other term is finish. And finish, you'll hear short finish, medium finish, long finish. Finish is just literally how it sounds. After you have swallowed and you're thinking a little bit, how long does that sensation last? And sometimes it's very fleeting. So if we have a very, it's a warm day, we're out on the deck and we have a chilled glass of Pinot Grigio, maybe with an ice cube in it. Well, it's not going to, at the end, when you finish it, it's poof, it's gone. Yet there are other times you drink maybe a beautiful Merlot that had all of these deep, plummy, rich flavors. And after you swallowed, it seemed to linger. There was this not only the feeling that was there, but there were flavors that lingered, and it stays with you. A good Riesling will do the same thing. You'll get these almost tropical flavors that just sort of will stay and linger. So that's all that finish means, and that's all that balance means. Yeah.
I was going to say we should probably review this Big Six.
So one good place to start for those of you that don't drink a lot of wine or that drink only one particular type of wine is it's difficult to narrow down where should I begin, right? So you get those questions all the time. What wine should I drink? Well, what we try to do is we begin with 6 wines called the Big Six, 3 whites and 3 reds. And the reason we choose these wines is because these are the wines that are the most widely planted throughout the world. You will see many, many different aspects of the same grape from different areas, as I spoke about earlier. So what that is Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, and Riesling for the whites. Those of you that don't know much about Riesling, I can tell you, Riesling is a great, if you're a white wine drinker, great wine to drink. It'll give you so many different aspects, so many different aromas. And it's wonderful if you're in the Northeast, if you're in these growing regions that are on a latitude with Austria and Alsace, the way we have in the Finger Lakes, the way we have in
Lake Erie,
Chautauqua County, and so on. We actually do, in America, really, really very good Riesling. So it's something to consider. I know not everyone's had Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc, but Riesling is the third. And then the 3 reds, Cabernet, of course, Merlot, grown all over the world, and Pinot Noir. And we do a particularly real, of course, Pinot Noir is the grape of Burgundy, France, but we do an outstanding job in the Willamette Valley here in America with Pinot Noir. And Pinot Noir is one of those grapes, even though it's a cool weather grape, is grown pretty much all over the world. So when you ask where should I start, that's where you should begin. Any of those 6 and kind of stay with them a little bit.
6 grapes, 5 S's. We've got 2 hints for you, but I know we're coming up 8 or 9 minutes left, so we want to leave some time for questions.
And that's with me sticking to notes. So 2 real quick things. One handy app. Great to have. It's free. There's almost no advertising. It's called Vinvino, Vinbino. It's free, but remember the example of walking into the wine store and there's that whole sea of Merlot labels? With this app, you just hold your phone up to it, take a picture, and in seconds, will give you reviews, pricing, what to expect from the wine. Invaluable, great tool, because we all get lost in wine stores. And the other thing is, I said earlier, you should, expectation is important. You should be looking up what it is that you like. Here's what you don't want to do. If you go and you had a really nice Merlot, you go home, you go to Google, and the first thing you do is go to Wikipedia. Don't do it, because you'll be shopping on Amazon in 5 minutes later, because you're going to get the chemistry. It's going to take all the fun out of it. Chemistry and history and all that stuff. That's not what you want. What you want for normal people like us, there is a site called Wine Folly, WINEF like in Frank, OLLY, winefolly.com, run by a woman, I think in Washington State named Puckett is the last, Madeline Puckett. It is absolutely perfect for people like us, meaning I'd like to learn a little bit more about Bordeaux. I'd like to learn a little bit more about Riesling. And you'll get a page with just the very basics. It's fun, maybe a video too. And then plenty of links if you'd like to see further. But it's very well done. So Vinvino is the app, winefolly.com is the place to go look. And thank you.
And thank you. And I know there's got to be a couple of questions. Hard to see our chat. So maybe we can, Lindsay, maybe Kevin or our Elaine, our panelists, Ryan, have a question, or if there's some in the chat, let us know.
I have a question, Pat and Donna. Thank you. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. I learned a lot. Can you tell me your thoughts about how the fires out in Napa may or may not have affected that vintage?
Well, first of all, since we're not drinking it yet, but I will tell you that there are reports and we've read about the influence of smoke in the bottle. And while we haven't explored that or researched or drank that yet, there is a lot of conversation. Quite frankly, I recently published work with one of our doctoral students on olive oil tourism, which we had started prior to the fires and did afterwards, because olive trees, as you know, and grapes often grow together. And one of our outcomes was to try to make sure that in these natural disasters, there's options, and there's options for them to recover. But we don't think that it's going to be significant, except for they lost a lot of harvest. So,
but as far as your question is about that yield from those grapes, and I think it's tough to know. I'll tell you one thing though. I am a big believer in where the grapes are grown, taking on aromas of what is nearby. I have had wines that tasted literally like pine needles, that go to find out basically was next to not a pine barren, but a pine forest, so to speak.
Like
think
honey.
About the example, right,
of honey.
If you've ever had
And
chestnut
bees.
honey, it's honey from bees that are around chestnut
trees.
Yeah.
There's
And you
reports.
taste it.
Yeah, there's reports that the smoke has changed some of the flavor profiles. But again, there's also the talent and the winemaker. So it's both in the vineyard and in the human.
So to answer your question, Kevin, I don't know. It's a crapshoot. I'd be curious to taste it when it's released.
But I hope you'll use the 5 S's.
What else do we have?
Someone asked, thank you very much. Someone asked, could you just reiterate the tasting order for those 6 wines you suggested to try?
I was going to say it's not an order, but I mean, we just 3 whites, 3 reds, Chardonnay, Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc. Chardonnay and Riesling are probably more common and more well-known, and Riesling. So we wouldn't suggest an order. Wines, Cab, Merlot, Pinot Noir. Maybe you would suggest an order.
Maybe a quick jumping off point is a quick jumping off point for white wine drinkers or red wine drinkers. So you're obviously one or the other, or you have a tendency toward one or the other. So let's say you're a white wine drinker. If you'd like to start with white wines, then I would start with something that you don't normally buy. So if you regularly buy Chardonnay, then start with Riesling or start with Sauvignon Blanc. Start with something that you aren't accustomed to. Likewise, if you're a red wine drinker and you're accustomed to Cabernet, then have a Pinot Noir, have a Merlot, do something different. And this is all about mindfulness and getting your brain working a little bit. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Donna, I wanted to give you time. You mentioned the laboratory, the tasting lab. I wanted to give you some time to talk about that.
Sure.
You wanted to share?
We're really fortunate. And when we come back to campus full, I hope you'll all come and visit us. We have got our fabulous student-run restaurant, Cafe Laura, in the Mateer building. But also we will be opening the School of Hospitality Management Collaboratory for Inclusion and Innovation. It'll be housed in the Marriott Foundation building right in front of the Nittany Lion Inn. So when you come to campus, you'll all know where it is. And in that room, we have a terrific interactive a lab, which it converts to a lot of different kinds of classroom and engaged experiences. But there's also a beverage lab. And so we have created a small lab that will allow us to focus on growing not only in the Commonwealth, and I say Lake Erie because Lake Erie's got great wines, if you don't know it. Please, those in Pennsylvania, but
shameless plug.
All 50 states make wine. They don't grow them in Alaska, but they ship in the juice. And all throughout our Commonwealth. But in that, we hope to do a lot to expand our beverage program so that people can appreciate what the contributions are of fermented products, whether it is wine or others. And in the events lab, which is where we will host not only events and meetings and engage scholarship for our events and meetings classes, but also our wine class. And we really hope that you'll come and visit us. So yes, we are excited about opening up. Also, I said innovation and inclusion. It includes tutoring labs and testing labs and a launch lab and our entrepreneurship lab. So entrepreneurs like Ryan, who have successfully launched business, and Kevin can come back to class and give lectures and engage with students who want to do that as well. So please do.
That sounds incredible. Thank you both so much for spending time with us this afternoon. And thank you to the Alumni Association for including our program within your We Are Week. We're very excited about it. And we want to thank our alumni and friends for joining and hope that you'll continue to join in on some of our other HHG at home programs. So thank you very much. And we are.
Yes, Penn State.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Oh, super.
Fun.
That was good.
Nice job, guys.
Oh, wait, is it still recording?
Glad you enjoyed it.
Are we
Thank
off?
you.
Are we off?
No, we're on.
I can hear you guys.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Really appreciate
Kevin
that.
and Ryan, we really do. Elaine, stuff, and Brent too. But we really do appreciate. And Lisa, I'm hoping we're not